Another thing too is I went ahead and put the cylinders in, I'm sorry, the piston heads and the rods together. So again, just to remind you, this is a setup that we're going to run. So they're Wiseco pistons, and then they are Eagle H rods. I'll give you the part numbers real quick. So for these, or whatever that says, VG30 turbo. They're oversized pistons, and then the connecting rods are these right here. Hopefully you can see that. There we go. ESP beam connecting rod. I read that these are good for like 1500 horsepower, so should be pretty good. Shouldn't have a broken rod again. To get the wrist pin into the piston head, what I had to do, and I'm sorry again that I didn't record it because my battery was dead, but you take the wrist pin, which is this piece inside, you stick it in the fridge, and then you take the connecting rod. So first I cleaned them both really good, wiped them down with rubbing alcohol, and then put the wrist pin in the freezer, and then put the connecting rod in the oven for about 5 minutes at 200 degrees. What that does is it makes the wrist pin shrink a little bit, and then the heat makes the rod expand just a little bit. I did 2 rods at a time. I just set the head, and I did all this in my kitchen, so I don't know that my wife would have let me record in there anyways. I put the piston head down, and then as soon as the 5-minute timer was up, grab the rod with the oven mitt, set it down in here, and then push the wrist pin straight through, right? So push the wrist pin straight through, boom. And it went in pretty easy. I think these wrist pins are tapered because it seemed like some went in easier than the other. So I would check both sides. If it doesn't go in at first, try the other side. And then interestingly enough, now that it's in, it actually slides pretty nice and smooth. So I put some assembly lube. I squirted it down in there and around here. And then also on this one, I put the clips in. The other ones don't have the clips in yet. I'll show you how I got those clips in. They were not easy. It was very difficult, but I'll show you the little trick that I used to get them in. And then when it comes to taking this piece off right there, there's very weird head right here. Hopefully you can see that. I end up using, I had these laying around. I bought these in Japan. I don't know what this says in English, but whatever that is, that's the one I used. I end up using this one right here, 11 mil, right? So it's got, I think it was like 13 points or something like that in there. So to get it off, I don't know why, but from the factory they're torqued on, so I had to use the impact to get them off. And then the next step really is to take the piston, put it without the rings, put it into the motor so we can measure the clearance on the rod, right? So we'll use the plastic gauge. We'll measure the clearance on the rods. We'll clean them, measure them, take them back out, clean them again, and then use assembly lube and then put them all in. All right, so the first one you want to do, this pin can slide around a little bit. So I would try to, what I did on my other one was I slid it kind of to one end to give me a little bit more space. I don't know if you can see that, but I pushed it down a little bit just to give me some more space. And then take this clip with the opened end towards the top of the piston. You push it in there. The idea is you want to push it in there to where there's a little bit of tension on the spring and the gap closes. And then you want to flip it. It's not easy. So once you get it in there like that, then you can kind of tilt it back to where it catches that lip and then sneak it in there. Hopefully that makes sense. probably not going to work the first time around. It took me a few tries on the other piston. You just want to be careful that you don't scratch, you don't gouge the inside of that surface there. Okay, see how I got it in there? Now I'm just going to tilt it backwards, try to let it catch the top, and then push into the bottom. Alright, so now that I have it in like that, what I'm going to do is push this, but at the same time, I'm going to use the pin to slide it and pop those forward ends, the top ends, into the groove. So hold it right here and then push. Not sure if you really saw that, but basically I used the wrist pin to kind of push it up into the groove at the top there, and then the bottom part was still sticking out, so I just used a screwdriver to lightly press it down till it popped all the way in. Now that works for this side, but once you get the other side, once you flip to the back side, you can't push it out anymore because it's already, you know, there's no more room because this clip is in. So I'm gonna show you how to get that one in. Basically it's kind of the same concept, except for you're gonna use the bottom lip. You're gonna use this bottom lip here, take your flathead screwdriver, hold it right here. Now this might scratch a little bit right here, but it doesn't matter because, you know, you're not gonna see that stuff anyways. So you're going to get the clips down in there, and then you're going to basically use this to pop the bottom into place just by going like this. Boom. Alright, so we got our clips in both sides of the piston, and now what I'm going to do is I'm going to slap the bearings in, real easy, right? And again, everything's already been cleaned. Just take this sucker, line up that little tab, goes right in. What I'm going to do is I'm going to get my stuff ready. So I got my piston here, right? Because the step that we're doing next is we're going to use our we're going to use this plastic gauge to check the bearing clearances. So I've already cleaned off that bearing. I'm doing the number 1. Again, there's no rings on the piston because all I'm doing is checking the clearance. There's no grease, no lubrication, so we can't spin anything once we get it on there. We got to make sure it doesn't move. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to put a piece of plastic gauge on there, and then I'm going to put the piston in through the number 1. And then I'm gonna have the cap on standby, the rod cap. I'm not sure if that's the right term for this, but that's what I'm calling it. So I'm gonna have this thing on standby, throw the bearing in. I'm gonna have this on standby with both of the bolts already lubricated with the fastening assembly lube. And might be hard to do. Let's see. Can I reach from there? Yeah, I should be able to reach from there. So I'm going to slide the piston in. I'm going to put the plastic gauge on there, slide the piston in, hold the piston, and put the cap on, and then torque it down, and then we'll get the measurement. And then we'll have to do all of them like that. Here we go. So we got all of our pistons laid out with the rings. Now you'll notice that the rings and the pistons are numbered, right? So for example, the rings that came in this box right here, number 1, and as I've been dealing with this piston, I wrote number 1 on it, and I always treat this thing like number 1. The reason for that is because I want to make sure that I measured all the clearance on the bearings with this piston in the right place that I expect to be, keeping the bearings intact. On top of that, I actually had the builder file and fit the rings to each piston and each cylinder wall. So if you check out the whatever piston you buy, this is basically how you figure out what your clearance needs to be. And again, I already paid him to do it, so I'm just going over to check a few of them to make sure they're good. But so my bore size is 3.465, and then depending on what your application is, you just take this number. For example, in this instance, it'll be 0.055 times 3.465, and then that gives you what your clearance should be. So in this case, it was 0.019. And there's the top ring and then the second ring. So I checked a couple of them. They're spot on. This is what he made mine out to be for my application, 0.021 for the top ring and 0.023 for the bottom ring. If you're taking a look at these, and it took me some time to figure out which rings are which rings. So when you read the directions, it says they can be installed in any direction if they're not beveled on the inside. These are the instructions that came with my pistons, and from these directions, I was able to understand that this one is the oil rail. Okay, I'm sorry, this is the oil ring expander. So this one that has the wavy thing, the wavy like look to it. The two skinny ones are the oil rails, and they just go top and bottom, okay, of this thing. And then these two are the top and second ring. And it took me a little bit of research to figure out which one was the top, which one was the second one. As you could see, like one's kind of darker and one's kind of like a silver color. I ended up figuring it out just based off the clearance, right? One was clearance a little longer than the other. And then I had an aha moment when you stick them into the piston, because they look like they're the same diameter, but when you stick them into the piston, the silver one will fit in either one, but the black one will only fit in the bottom, right? In the bottom ring. So, this one has got to be the second ring, and the silver one is the top ring. Okay? So, there is a little bit of a bevel on the outside. I'm not sure if you could really see that. It's a really light bevel on the outside edge. However, since this thing, the directions don't say, it says, if you have basically it says if you have a mark, to put it with the mark side up. We don't have a mark. We do have the letters N100. So I'm going to put it with the letter N100 up, and then we're going to call it a day. So what we're going to do now is clean these oil rings, clean the top of the piston, and then install the rings onto the piston. And then I will do that for all of these, and you'll see me spot check a few of the clearances just to make sure they're good. So I'll walk you through how to install these rings once I clean it. Okay, real quick, I'm going to show you how to check the gap on these to make sure they're good. All I did was took the ring, put it down in the cylinder, and then I took one of my pistons with no rings in it, used this as a guide to push it down in there, and I made sure that it was flush on these edges, so that way I knew it was perfectly parallel or even on both sides. So once you mash that down in there, you're going to end up with a little gap. Hopefully you can see that gap. There's a gap right there. And then all you got to do is take your feeler gauges. I think that's what these are called. That is a second ring. So I expect it to be around .023. 0.023. So go ahead and stick it in there. It's kind of tight, not fitting. So then I'll check .022. .022 seems to fit pretty easy. Okay, now that we got everything clean, now I'm going to put all the rings on. To do this, you need to have a ring installation tool, this thing right here. Okay, and then also I'm going to follow the directions that come on this as far as the gaps, lining up the gaps, right? So this says, hey, engines to the front. These are where all your gaps are going to be. So I'm going to make sure all my gaps are in the right places. Also going to follow these directions. They tell you exactly, they walk you through ring installation. So, all right, we'll start with the oil ring expander. That's this thing. It's a wavy looking thing. Just make sure that the ends butt up just like the diagram shows. That one's going to go in the very bottom groove. You don't really need the tool for that one. It just goes on pretty easy. Next is going to be the oil rails, either side up. First rail below, second rail above. So to use this tool, all you do, it's pretty easy. You just stick that sucker in there. And see that it opens it up. We're going to weigh the factory piston against the new pistons to see if there's a difference in weight. So scale set to grams. Here's the OEM piston that we pulled out of the old motor. I don't know where the nuts are, so it's going to be a little bit lighter. But here's a bearing because the inside bearing's not there, so we'll throw that on there for weight comparison. All right, so that one's weighing in at a whopping 1,280.8 grams. All right, let's check the new aftermarket ones. So here's the new aftermarket ones. I'll do one that does not have the rings installed. Well, we'll do one that has the rings installed. Here's the piston, that thing, and two nuts. So that's weighing in at 1,129.1 grams. So that's pretty decent weight savings. It's like, I don't know what my math's like, 50 grams. 50 grams plus the other one had, the nuts are missing, so it's probably a little bit more. So about 50 grams less. All right, so got all the piston rings fitted, and I went ahead and threw one piston in because I wanted to make sure it wasn't a total fail before I walked through on how to do this. Okay, so originally I bought the high dollar Wiseco freaking sleeve where it kind of funnels down and makes the piston fit in there, but turns out this thing is 87 millimeters and my piston is 88 millimeters, so it's too big. So all right, so what I ended up doing was I went to AutoZone and I bought this thing, and I wanted to try it before to make sure that it worked, and it did work. It worked really good. I was surprised. It worked really good. So it's kind of like it kind of ratchets and then sizes down. I think it can do up to like 5 inches or something like that, which is huge. All right, so what I did was I went ahead and dropped one in. I'm gonna show you real quick how I did it. So the first thing is, obviously, take a look at the piston. Make sure the piston is clean. Make sure everything on it is good. Give it one last look, because this is gonna be, you know, the last time. So I got like a fresh rag, and I wiped it down. Make sure there's no fingerprints on it, no smudges, nothing crazy. Just kind of give it a nice look over real quick. I also did a couple other things. I said, I looked at the rings, make sure that the rings were in the right place, right? So just making sure that they didn't move, because they have, you know, especially the top ones, they have a tendency to move around. So hey, that's forward. So forward should be that piston ring. One on the bottom should be going forward. One on the top should be going backwards. Okay, we got those two in place, and that's something you're gonna have to keep checking as you go. Make sure you got the right bottom cap and the numbers match up. 31179, awesome. Clean your bearings one last time before you put the assembly lube on there. Clean it off real good with some rubbing alcohol. Make sure there's no debris on there. Yada yada yada. Clean that off real good. Another thing you want to make sure is make sure you got the right piston. You're putting it in the right spot. So this, according to my drawing, is going to be piston number 2, and it's going to go on the right side. What we'll do to make it a little bit easier to go in, right? Because what you don't want to happen is you don't want this thing smacking a bunch of stuff, right? But it's not going to go all the way in at first. So I tilted the block to where it basically is more of a straight down drop, and then I can kind of guide the back end so it's not smacking into anything as it drops onto the crankshaft. All right, so I'll just take this. John, if you can keep on the camera and make sure it gets the... All right, we're just gonna tilt it like that. All right, so hopefully you can see that. It makes the alignment more straight up and down. And then I'm gonna take the crank and I'm gonna turn it to where it's at the highest point, which I guess technically that's top dead center for this piston, right? So that way I can actually reach my hand down here, and kind of guide the rod so it's not scratching or banging anything. All right, so first step is take the piston, just give it a good look over on the bearing, make sure there's nothing crazy going on there. Everything's good. I got my clamps in there, everything's good. All right, it's number 2 piston, sweet. I'm gonna take some assembly lube. Again, this is what I'm using, Lucas oil. Put a little squirt on there. And then I rub it all out, make sure it's nice and spread out. And then I'm gonna load this thing up into my piston compressor, checking one more time that my rings are in the right place. All right, they're in the right place. What I've been doing, I've been kind of holding it. Here's the ring compressor. So I'm holding my piston rings so they stay where I want them to. Oh, it's not working very well. Make sure that thing is up so I could put the tool in there. Stick it on there. Joe, will you crank that? Put the cranks right down there.
This thing?
Yeah. Give it a crank. And again, I'm just holding it just right above where the rings are.
You want to be like tight,
Hold on,
tight?
hold on.
Cooking?
Make sure it's nice and centered on there. What I did last time, I just lined it up at the bottom of the, once you start to see those grooves, then you know you're right at the edge of the ring. All right, go ahead and give it another crank. Okay, I think that's good. All right, so now you got your piston loaded. Make sure you got forward going forward. Double check, make sure you got the right back end that's gonna go. I'm not sure what that thing's called. I guess rod cap or something. Make sure the numbers match up. Got it right here. This is the one I'm gonna put on with those 2 bolts. And then, Joe, as I push this through, oh yeah, one more thing that I did. So this might be kind of controversial, but I just used a regular, I think it's like 1030. Yeah, 1030 oil. I just put a little bit in here in the old goldenrod squirter. Looks pretty cool. And then I just took a little bit and like squirted on my fingers and then like put it on the cylinder walls to try to like help that thing slide back and forth, right?
Pause.
Just a little bit.
You put like motor oil in there?
Yeah. I think it looks cool.
It's
Oh,
an
I like
oil
it.
squirter.
It's the goldenrod squirter. Okay. All right, so now you got your piston all loaded up. Double check, make sure you're going forward. We've done all our checks. All right, Joe, I'm gonna lower it in there. Will you just no from bottom?
I can't
Just-
even get my finger in there to even do
You'll see it.
anything.
You'll see it come to you. Just make sure it's sitting on the. You see it? Okay.
No.
So at this point, what you want to do is you want to look at the rod at the bottom and make sure that it's, you know, the bearing.
All right, push
Make
down
sure it's sitting on the bearing just right.
tiny bit more.
You need to come up or down.
Down.
Okay. So what I want you to do, Joe, and this is what I did before. I tapped it while holding my finger. Maybe I should show you a picture of it. So I just held this part right here with my finger just kind of lightly. So that way I just don't want it to smash into the bearing, right? You just want to make sure that it, oh yeah, another thing too, make sure that that bearing is spotless, which I already did that. Put your finger right here and then you could bang it with a hammer and then hold it right here. So you're kind of guiding it to where it needs to be. Are you guiding it, Joe?
Yeah, I'm guiding it.
All right. Now for this, all I did literally, I thought I was going to be able to do this, but obviously I can't because this thing's got a huge freaking edge on it. I just used the bottom like this and just kind of lightly tapped it in. And it goes in real easy.
Oh, beautiful.
And once that thing pops off, you know you're good. Wipe off wood dust. Now at this point, this thing should be holding it in pretty good, so you don't have to worry about it falling off. And what we'll do is we'll flip it, and then we'll attach the rod cam, I guess is what it's called. So just do a visual inspection on the old bearing, but that's where we're gonna end up putting the cap at right there. We'll make sure there's no dust on there, then we'll put some lube on the cap and then throw it in there. actually had to reach a stopping point. The motor's been covered up in plastic. I was not able to get all 6 cylinders in. What happened was, basically, as we were using this driver, some of the seals were sneaking out past the bottom edge, and then that blow to try to get it in there caused one of the second rings to break, and then caused one of the oil rings to break, right? So I don't know if you can see that, but there's a bunch of chunks missing out of it. So I went ahead and ordered new piston ring sets. There's nothing wrong with the block. There was no scarring or anything there. There was a little bit, I think, on the edge of one of these pistons. Let me see. Yeah, right there. I don't know if you can really see that or not, but it's a little bit of scratching. So what I'll do is I'll pull all the rings back off again, clean them. I'll hit that with some sandpaper, something like 2000 grit, something really light, just to take the edges off. I don't think it's a showstopper or anything like that. Just kind of really sucks. So I got the pistons. I ordered 2 brand new sets of rings, so I'm going to do all brand new rings on those 2. And then we'll clean them off, get the burrs off. There was no marks on this one, a few marks on that one. So, just lesson learned. And I also went ahead and ordered the right size ring compressor sleeve. So again, this is an 87. I needed an 88, so I ordered an 88. We'll see if the 88, if that one does any better, and I'll report back and let you know. So we finally got all 6 of the pistons into the block. So rotating assembly is now complete. It was definitely a challenge. As far as a ring compressor, honestly, I don't think there was much of a difference between the 2. You like this one better?
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, this one was easier to load for sure. You just kind of slid it in there and tilted it back and forth. This one was kind of a pain in the to load, but it is what it is. But at the end of the day, we were able to get 4 pistons in with this one, no issues. And then those last 2 pistons, number 4 and number 6, those are the ones where the piston rings broke. So we tried this one. I don't think it was this that helped us. I think it was more of, instead of having the crank at top dead center, we had it at bottom dead center. Because what we saw happen on piston number 4 was, when we hammered it in, it stopped when it hit the crank, because it was, you can line the dot forward, but that doesn't mean you're going to not be off by a millimeter or 2. So the crank stopped it, and then it put a little scratch on the crank, luckily not on the bearing surface. So we cleaned it up, and then we ended up, I said, hey, let's try putting the crank at bottom dead center for that piston. And we did that, and it worked beautifully. We got the first one in first go, and then the second one, like second or third go, it went in. So if there's some engine builders out there, please comment, like, what do you think? What should the position of the crank be? Bottom dead center or top dead center on that piston when you push it, when you hammer it in? What are your thoughts? I think bottom dead center.
It was much easier.
Yeah.
Faster.
It was a whole lot easier. So the next step on this motor is to throw the heads on, the oil pan, and all the associated parts. So that's what we'll do next. Stay tuned for the video, and hopefully we get this thing done soon. We're out.